Jeff Jackson, you're going to take a long time now, are you? Here you are, Director of, that's why I didn't ask any questions, Finance and Treasurer, to do the budget overview. You want almost an hour, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm shooting for 50 minutes, so we'll see if we can do that.
Councillor Starrs moved it. Short reading.
I can stop. It's fine by me.
No. That's okay. We got to go through this. I hear you have good news for us, so we want to hear good news.
Okay, so we'll start with a bit of levity and the budget basics video, and this is posted on our webpage. It's the homepage that you get to.
The city of Mississauga is a successful city with a lot going on. We've grown into the 6th largest city in Canada, and we're continuing to change. Our annual operating budget is around $900 million. So where does that money come from, and how is it spent? In a nutshell, we get most of our money from residential and commercial property taxes. We need to manage that money wisely. From every tax dollar we collect, only 35 cents goes to the City of Mississauga. The rest goes to the Region of Peel and Government of Ontario. We're getting a lot of value out of those 35 cents. It pays for the services you need, like fire and emergency response, keeping roads in good repair, and providing public transit. But that's not all. You also get parks and natural areas, libraries, recreation programs, community centers, snow clearing, animal services, museums, public art, street lighting, and much more. Your tax dollars go a long way to provide high-quality services and programs in Mississauga. But we have some tough choices to make because costs are increasing. Roads, bridges, buildings, and our transit system are becoming more expensive to maintain and replace. And we also need to prepare for the unexpected. Storms, floods, and other emergencies can cause damage that is costly to repair. That's why we put so much effort into planning the city's budget. It helps us make decisions about where, when, and how your taxes are spent. Our good financial planning will make sure Mississauga continues to be a great place to live, work, play, and learn, now and in the future. That's where you come in. It's your money, and we want to understand what your priorities are. Find out how you can get involved by visiting mississauga.ca/budget.
So as committee knows, we spend the early part of the year to develop our business plans in each of our 18 service areas. This establishes the priorities upon which the budget or our spending and revenue plan is based. Through the planning process, service levels are reviewed and adjusted based upon community needs and ability to fund. In past years, I've spoken first about the budget process and second about the budget's impact upon property taxes. Today, I'd like to start the presentation from a different perspective and address a question that you have undoubtedly heard from residents and businesses, namely that taxes are increasing at too fast a pace in Mississauga. In particular, I want to speak about inflation, since some taxpayers want us to target tax increases to inflation. I'd also like to speak to service levels and what this means over a long period of time. And finally, council and staff's desire to build a great city and how we are doing that in this budget and forecast period. So inflation, what is that? We all know inflation is the change in value of our money over some period of time, generally a year. There are many measures of inflation. We can use Consumer Price Index, but which one? Canada, Ontario, the GTA? Maybe we should use the Construction Price Index. Do we use 2018 numbers? Do we use projections for 2019? There's lots of permutation and variability. Costs, as we know, can go up and down. We're familiar with gas prices going up and down, electronics going down, and wages going up. Inflation measures are an average for a particular category or type of spending. When people say that taxes should increase at or below inflation, what do they mean? Since it is rarely clear, I'll tell you what I mean when I refer to inflation. For a number of years, I've shown you a chart that looks something like this and breaks down the year's proposed tax increase. You probably remember me calling it my favorite chart. It shows the tax increase related to normal operations, new initiatives or new stuff, and maintaining our infrastructure. Normal operations means the operating cost of providing city services. Over 60% of this cost is comprised of labor. To maintain our existing level of service, we need to increase our budget by $6.8 million, or 1.4%, which when you adjust for cost savings and assessment growth becomes 0.8%, which is shown on the slide. This can reasonably be compared to the Consumer Price Index, which as of the end of September 2018 was 2.2%. New initiatives represents changes in service levels or the addition and sometimes reduction of new services. These are services requested by the public or services needed in a big city and not a bedroom community. These include better transit, more efficient roads, new fire stations, expanded parks and trails, and excellent recreation facilities. New initiatives, after adjusting for new or increased revenues, adds 2% to the budget. I've not compared new initiatives to inflation because it's a new service and it's not increasing from a base. And I don't think anybody in this room would ever think of comparing your Rogers or Bell bill to inflation if you change your service package, and that's basically what this is. It's a bunch of new services. The last line on this chart, the capital infrastructure levy, has a 2% rate impact. The 2% annual infrastructure levy continues to be proposed because this is what allows us to meet our capital infrastructure needs. When I refer to our capital infrastructure needs, I mean the funding we need to maintain and replace our existing infrastructure, and not new things that we might be considering building. The city owns $9.2 billion worth of infrastructure. This slide provides a very high-level summary of the replacement cost of our current infrastructure. We currently use replacement cost and how old our assets use as a proxy for how much funding we should be providing to replace our aging infrastructure. We also look at the condition of our assets and determine which ones need to be replaced and in what priority. Mississauga has had asset management plans in place for many years within the service areas. The province has enacted legislation over the last year mandating asset management plans for all municipalities, so we are revisiting and updating our plans. Our first deliverable will be an asset management policy, which must be approved by Council before July 1st, 2019. We will bring a progress report to Council in the new year. Our second deliverable will be updated asset management plans for our core assets, roads, and stormwater, which is due before July 1st, 2021. Comprehensive plans for all assets are required before July 1st, 2023. The next step, the next slide, you've seen part of that in Jim's presentation, so I'll just skip over part of my notes. But basically, as he mentioned, the infrastructure gap has decreased by $49 million since 2013, and that's as a result of the 2% infrastructure levy. But we also continue to require funding from the federal and provincial governments to close this gap. And remember, this is for our existing infrastructure, and as we grow this great city, we need to continue adding more and more assets that are required. So you may wonder, if we've been able to reduce our gap, why do we need to continue the infrastructure levy over the next 10 years? It's an integral part of our financial plan. The 2% allows the city to fund an additional $600 million in maintaining or replacing our current infrastructure. That's what we call state of good repair, and $200 million in city building projects, what we call improved projects, over the next 10 years. If we reduce the levy to 1%, we'd lose $400 million in funding, and prudently, most of this would come from our improved projects. If we reduce the levy to 0%, we would lose the full $800 million in funding, and that represents 28% of our total capital program. Our ability to maintain existing assets would be compromised, and our infrastructure gap would grow in the coming years. So getting back to this chart, and the capital infrastructure levy line, as mentioned, we've chosen 2% as an affordable increase to maintain our infrastructure and provide some new infrastructure. This 2% increase can be compared to the 4% increase in the non-residential construction price index, which I believe is a good measure of inflation for this service, since the majority of this category's costs relate to construction and building things. If you think about it, to keep up with inflation, we really should be proposing more than 2%. Finally, there is the overall budget and tax increase. The budget, as noted, is proposed to increase by 4.8% or 1.7% on the overall tax bill. This compares to a 2.2% CPI increase, as we previously discussed. Now, some taxpayers are critical that we use the 1.7% number rather than the 4.8% number when we describe the tax increase. We used to describe the 4.8% as the increase in the city portion of the budget. This means nothing to the average taxpayer who only seeks to compare their tax bill year over year. The 1.7% figure, while less sensational, actually means something to people and can be easily verified by the average taxpayer. So I'm going to change direction now and talk a little bit about service levels. So most people recognize service level changes like frequency of buses on a route or type of recreation programs. But service levels change incrementally over long periods of time in ways that people don't really think about, and probably because they can't remember the changes. For example, this slide shows two different buses, one from 1984 and one from today. And you look at them, and other than the new bus is articulated, contains a bike rack, electronic messaging, and can hold more passengers, on the surface they look similar, but they really are quite different. Today's buses have low floors and kneel to assist passengers entering, and therefore they're quite accessible. They can be electric or run on other fuels such as biodiesel, are air-conditioned, contain GPS so that both passengers and transit control know where they are. They contain cameras and other security systems. They announce stops, and they provide for payment using Presto cards, and they also count the number of passengers who use the bus. This is a totally different level of service from what existed years ago, and it costs money. But you can't return to what was because that's no longer seen as an acceptable level of service to the taxpayers and to the users of the bus for that matter. While our community centers still function as meeting places, they're physically much different. They're larger with lots of windows and lighting. More of them have pools, both regular and therapeutic, and hot tubs too. They have fitness facilities with superb equipment in them, and many now have libraries attached. They're much more welcoming places and certainly represent a higher standard of service. And this is just a quick example of how pools even look different. As a city, we're concerned about climate change and reducing greenhouse emissions. We now build green roofs and have heat-dissipating windows. We have converted our streetlights to LED and have changed facility equipment like heating, air conditioning, and lighting to reduce energy consumption. We're actively working to build out our bicycle lanes and trails to reduce the need for cars and to improve safety. Many of our streets are becoming more pedestrian-friendly as well. Parks are different too. Under Council's direction, we're installing shade structures and washrooms in some of our parks. Even the lowly road has changed. We now have a control center to monitor traffic conditions. There are cameras installed at intersections to help out. Traffic lights are computerized, computers turn on the street lights, and this is all done through the city's own fiber optic cable, not wires controlled by Bell or Rogers. We are taking steps to improve traffic flow without resorting to road widening, which in many cases is not even possible because there's a limit to how wide you want your roads to be. Our services continue to change and evolve. Fire is moving towards proactive education and inspection to maintain service levels, in addition to building new stations. City is relying more and more on technology to improve service delivery, and I got a whole list, but I'm not going to go through that. So, preparing for the future, we're being proactive in our planning for the future of Mississauga. This budget provides funding to plan for 3 future transit projects: Lakeshore, Dundas, and the Downtown Transitway Connection. These planning projects are necessary to ensure that we are able to maximize future provincial and federal funding and opportunities, and to reduce the impact of these necessary transit services on the Mississauga taxpayer. And as always, we need to keep up with federal and provincial requirements, which can include obvious downloading or hidden rules and regulations. All of these things are important and cost money. I mention them only because you can't compare what your taxes paid for in previous generations with what our needs and the public expectations are today. Finally, I want to provide one additional take on the question of why taxes go up. It would be very easy for council to forgo spending to maintain our assets or to cut services and give the illusion that the city was holding tax increases to inflation or below. But this would jeopardize the viability of our city and would pass the cost to future generations. You can get by for a while doing this, but eventually you get increased costs or even worse, a catastrophic failure. And I didn't make up this picture, it was in the Toronto Star, so. In Mississauga, both the public and you, our council, want to build a great city. I did a presentation to a class at UTM in October about the budget process, and it was clear to me that this group of people were looking for a very different type of city than I was at their age. Their needs are much more refined and sophisticated, and they truly do want to live in a global cosmopolitan city. So, the 2019 business plan and budget really does balance tax affordability with the need to maintain and expand services and infrastructure to build that great city. The BMA presentation that you just saw clearly shows that Mississauga's property taxes are reasonable and not excessive. They also show that the city's financial position is improving. More importantly, we know that 89% of Mississauga residents rate quality of life as either good or excellent. Our 10-year capital forecast continues to build out the city and ensure that service needs are met. These include improved MyWay service, fire response times, and enhanced security within our transit system and buildings. A lot of work goes into developing the budget and business plan. It's a 9-month process that culminates in the next month as Budget Committee reviews the plans. During the first part of the year, service areas develop their business plans. These are then costed and funding decisions made. In June, we meet with Council to ensure that our plans are moving in the right direction. Over the summer, we develop our capital spending plans, and in the fall, we pull it all together in the budget book, which you received a couple weeks ago and has been publicly posted. Our priorities continue to align to the foundation of our vision, which was set out several years ago. And although you just went through a major public engagement process called an election, we still needed a process to encourage and solicit public comment on the 2019 budget. On October 31st, we posted our online budget allocator on the city's engagement site. We continue to receive submissions and comments, with over 800 submissions received to date and 278 comments. We have targeted our social media campaign to include both younger and older adult audiences, where our research tells us there are additional opportunities to engage. We are conducting a print and online advertising program that includes In-Sauga and Mississauga News, plus a variety of multicultural publications in conjunction with the Diverse Communications Program. On January 16th, Mayor Crombie will host a citywide telephone budget session where residents can ask budget-related questions. We've also considered hosting ward-specific sessions pending Council's interest in participating. And still to take place, finance staff will attend ward meetings when invited, as well as public requests to attend meetings to discuss the budget. On January the 11th, Gary and myself will be briefing the Mississauga Board of Trade Policy Committee. We also advertise the budget sessions through social media, posters scattered throughout the city facilities and on the screens in Celebration Square. And you will receive a corporate report before the January 14th meeting on all of the allocator comments. Can probably skip this because we already talked about the long-range financial plan, but basically we're in good shape. In terms of credit rating impacts, municipalities are not allowed to use debt to finance our operations. Debt can only be used to purchase long-lived assets. Debt provides increased cash flow to finance asset renewal and to spread large costs over multiple budget years. Reasonable debt levels allow the city to maintain its AAA credit rating. This in turn reduces financing costs. Reasonable debt levels maintain a strong balance sheet and ensure financial resiliency. Lower debt levels provide the city with financial resilience in dealing with future challenges, and rapidly rising debt levels could impact our credit rating. This budget makes reasonable use of debt to finance infrastructure. We take a pay-as-you-go approach. About 1% of the 2% infrastructure levy is used to ensure we can pay the interest on and repay the capital of the debt that we are issuing in 2019 over the next 10 years. We have followed this practice each year with the levy, so we know we have sufficient funds set aside for any debt taken on to date. This chart you've seen before. It shows our debt charges, which is carrying costs and principal, which is both principal and interest, as a percentage of own source revenues, which is basically the revenue under our control, like taxes and fees, and not things not under our control, like grants. We anticipate an increase from 3.9% in 2019 to around 5% in the latter half of the 10-year forecast period. Provincial legislation limits municipalities to 25% of own source revenues, so we're well below that. Our own policy, and we're working on an updated one, provides for 10% for tax-funded debt and a further 5% for development charges funded debt. This is the same chart as the previous one, only it's expressed in dollars. As taxes increase, our borrowing room increases, hence the upward slope in the lines. The budget proposes the borrowing of debt in the amount of $48 million in 2019, resulting in debt charges of $30 million in 2019. And we don't believe issuing this amount of debt will impact our AAA credit rating. Gary mentioned the city continues to be respected for its financial planning and budget preparation and its strong balance sheet, and we expect that this budget will be similarly recognized. You saw Jim's presentation, and this was his conclusion. And I think the report was very positive and complimentary to the city. Our business plan priorities are consistent with prior years, delivering the right services, implementing cost containment strategies, maintaining our infrastructure, and moving forward on our strategic plan. At the June Budget Committee meeting, the preliminary estimate for the budget showed a 6.1% budget increase, or 2.1% on the tax bill. Over the summer, we refined the budget. We added some stuff, took away some stuff, and the impact has now been reduced to 4.8%, or 1.7% on the total tax bill. And this is a graphical look at the 2019 proposed operating budget. The increase is $26.4 million. This slide breaks down the increase into categories of maintain current service levels, new initiatives, and infrastructure levy. Almost 2/3 of the increase is due to fire services and My Way. That small green sliver is the increase required to fund all of the other departments. The city continues to deliver money through fiscal responsibility. We examine our processes and improve efficiencies. The city has saved over $55 million since 2009 by innovating and improving processes. For 2019, staff has identified an additional $3.1 million in efficiencies and cost savings. Our Lean program is an essential part of our drive to greater efficiency and cost reduction. This is a snapshot of the metrics that we monitor on a regular basis, including cost benefits. Through Lean, we have avoided, saved, and freed up capacity, and the number is higher than what says there, and we're now up to $9.5 million for 2018. This is another representation showing the relative impact of new initiatives upon the 2019 budget. So getting down to some details, let's speak a little bit about fire and emergency, and this is the budget side of what you heard this morning from the Chief's presentation. This budget provides a significant increase in spending on fire and emergency services to maintain and improve service levels, which have been falling as the population has increased and road congestion has become worse. This budget increases spending for enhanced fire public education, expanded fire inspection including high-rise buildings, the opening of Fire Station 120 at Eglinton and Hurontario, the building, staffing, and equipment of an additional 6 fire stations over the next 12 years, certifying all firefighters to updated National Fire Protection Association standards, improvements in fleet and equipment maintenance, and enhanced community preparedness training and education. We spent a large amount of time over the summer trying to figure out how to fund this new fire initiative. We needed to fund $215 million over a 12-year period. That's the period over which those stations will be built. So we established a separate reserve, and on this chart, the bars show the various costs. Through a 1% per year tax increase of each of 2019, 20, 21, and 22, so basically this term of council, 1% each year, will go towards this special reserve, and that will allow us to fund a new program over the 12-year period. The green dotted line shows the balance in the reserve fund. Funds accumulate and are spent. The reserve fund balances peaks in 2028 and then declines until build-out of the 6 stations by 2032. And we did model a number of other options. We looked at it, increases over the 10 years. We looked at issuing debt. I think this one turned out to be the least expensive, and sort of because it coincided with the council term made some sense to us. Moving on to My Way, it continues to grow and expand its services. This budget provides a continuing planned increase for My Way of a 2% service growth, which is reasonably consistent with the past few years. That 2% includes 1.4% growth increase, plus an additional 0.6% increase to maintain service levels in major construction zones such as Burnhamthorpe or here, Ontario. It includes an increase of 10 cents in diesel fuel costs, so from 91 cents to $1.01, of which a portion is funded also through a drawdown from reserves, and a new mechanic apprenticeship program. And some of the increased costs are offset by increased ridership and higher fares. Included in the My Way service budget request is an additional 4 transit enforcement officers and 1 transit enforcement analyst to accommodate growth in both My Way services and the supporting services provided by the Transit Enforcement Unit, managed by Facilities and Property Management. Additionally, FPM is requesting 8.9 full-time equivalents for security officers to allow for 2 additional mobile patrols during high-activity periods to deliver enhanced security services citywide for staff, public programs, and services. And I think those hours are between 11 and 11, if I remember correctly. As is the case every year, we propose staffing adjustments based upon new initiatives, major capital project contracts ending, or efficiencies found. This budget proposes the addition of 112 new staff, and there is a chart on page B78 of your budget book that gives more details on this. So back to taxes. The 2019 proposed operating budget will see a 4.8% increase over 2018, which translates to a 1.69% impact on the tax bill. Now, I should note that the region shows up here as a 2.4% target, and you would know more than me because you're regional councillors and you hear all the discussion up there. But I do understand that the region increase is being projected to go to 3.3% from 2.4%, but since council hasn't met to discuss that, we used their original projection, and that's what we've got for the 2.75. But if the 3.3 is in fact where regional council chooses to go, you'd land up with a 3.15% overall increase.
Wait a minute. It would be a blended 3.1?
It would be 3.15 as opposed to
3.1, but that's, everybody listening?
Yeah, 3.15 as opposed to the 2.75 that's shown here. But because
Blended
we're not
rate.
part of regional council, I just sort of warn you what's coming.
Thank you.
Over the next 10 years, this budget proposes to spend $2.8 billion on capital projects and infrastructure. Maintaining what we currently own is our priority, so 70% of these funds support state of good repair. On the right chart, you can see the breakdown of where the funds are being spent for state of good repair. This slide shows where the remaining 30% is being spent on improved projects. The major source of funding continues to be tax dollars, with significant use of federal gas tax and developer charges. So what are we buying? For My Way, for example, $235 million is funding bus replacements over the 10-year period, and that includes some hybrid buses. $64 million for bus maintenance, and $20 million for fleet expansion. LRT, you've had a number of briefings. We know that it's being funded by the province through Metrolinx, but there is some peripheral work around the LRT corridor that the city is funding. These are Mississauga-specific improvements and are therefore not in the standard LRT specs. Council has previously approved these. This amounted to $26.6 million, and Metrolinx has committed a further $10.6 million. but we're also reprioritizing some of our existing projects to ensure we are efficient. For example, we are replacing and upgrading municipal storm sewers while the roads are dug up for the LRT. The 10-year capital forecast includes $851 million for roads, and some of these are Burnhamthorpe Road West widening between 9th Line and Loyalist Drive, Credit View Road widening between Bancroft Drive and Old Credit View Road, Goreway Drive grade separation, Courtney Park Drive between Kennedy Road and Tompkin, including the 403 interchange, Stave Bank and the Credit River active transportation bridges, QEW Credit River active transportation bridges, cycling network development, and the Loreland Yard, which will be used by both Works and Parks and Forestry. Construction of the new community center in Churchill Meadows is underway. Major facility infrastructure projects over the next 10 years, and you heard quite a number of them this morning, but Burnhamthorpe Community Center indoor pool will be in service around 2022. Malton Community Hub at Lincoln Alexander Secondary School next year. Carbon Corbison Community Center indoor pool in service around 2024. South Common Community Center renovation in service around 2026. Huron Park Community Center renovation in service around 2028. And Mississauga Valley Community Center out towards the end of the plan in 2028. Major parks and forestry projects over the next 10 years. There's a number of waterfront and downtown parks. Churchill Meadows Community Center Park, former Harris Lands, former Pheasant Run Public School, and former Willow Glen Public School. Number of park trail connections, shade structures, washroom criteria for future portable and permanent facilities, signage at 375 parks and 94 greenland spaces, and 2,500 new waste receptacles. And I'd also mention that we're in the midst of a waterfront financing study to identify the costs associated with the waterfront development, and this information will form part of the 2020 and future years' budgets. Library you heard about again this morning during Laurie's presentation, but the central library expansion of the 4th floor, repurposing auxiliary spaces, redevelopment of the atriums, a whole big push for technology and digital hubs, redevelopment of the pavilion and the breezeway, modernize and convert Noel Ryan Auditorium, and then there's some smaller library projects. Stormwater, which is its own standalone budget. Over the past year, on the left-hand side, we've completed the construction of the Eastgate Park Stormwater Management Facility. This facility supports flood mitigation and improves capacity in the downstream system within the Cooksville Creek watershed. And on the right side, completion of culvert replacements and the installation of an enhanced grass swale along Burnhamthorpe Road East. In addition, the Matheson Boulevard Stormwater Pond project was completed. This facility provides stormwater quality and quantity control for approximately 20% of the Cooksville Creek watershed area and reduces the 100-year storm flow by approximately 80%, providing a significant reduction in flood risk within this watershed. For the 10-year capital plan for stormwater, we have Cooksville Creek erosion control from Meadows to Rathburn, Mississauga LRT storm sewer improvements, so we talked about that, Mississauga Stormwater Management Master Plan, storm pond rehabilitation and dredging in a number of locations, Sheridan Creek erosion control from Lushes Avenue to Fletcher's Creek Valley Crescent, Applewood Creek erosion control, Mary Fix flood evaluation study, and Little Etobicoke Creek channel widening and construction. 83% of the 10-year capital plan is funded through the stormwater charge. 16% of the 10-year capital plan is funded through the development charges, and 0.6% of the 10-year capital plan is funded through the development contributions. This shows the capital reserve, so there's two reserves, one for capital and one for stormwater pipes. The blue bars identify annual spending from the capital reserve fund over the 10-year forecast period. The red line is the target for the reserve, and basically over the period we're maintaining our reserve. Stormwater pipe reserve is different, looks a little bit different because it's a 100-year reserve fund. designed to replace storm pipes when they reach the end of their life. This fund will be carrying large balances until major replacements are needed in 60 years or so. The stormwater charge itself is a dedicated charge used to fund stormwater collection, retention, and water quality. Prior to 2016, stormwater was funded through property taxes. The charge is used to fund only the stormwater program and matches the cost of this charge against properties which contribute to stormwater runoff, basically those with large areas of pavement. Credits of up to 50% are provided to properties which are able to reduce their runoff. If you recall, past plans have assumed an annual increase in the stormwater rate of 2%, which will provide larger contributions to the capital and pipe reserves. This year, we are changing the effective date of the increase to April 1st, 2019, to better align with the Region Appeal's implementation date for water and sewer charge increases. Peel water bills include the stormwater charge, and there's a one-time loss of revenue of $220,000 resulting from this change. The city uses a combination of tax funds, user fees, investment charges and levies, and other revenue to pay for the array of services it provides. Property tax revenue covers 59% of total gross budget, of our total gross budget of $874 million, while user fees covers 21%. The Municipal Accommodation Tax, or MAT, was implemented in 2018 and is charged to hotel occupants with stays of 30 days or less. Tax collected is remitted by each hotel monthly to the city. The rate was established at 4% of the room rate, and no changes proposed to this rate. So we expect a total revenue in 2019 of $9.8 million. You deduct from that $100,000 for administration. The remaining revenue is split 50% between Toronto Tourism and 50% going to the city. So that equals $4.9 million. And so far it'll fund the following projects: $100,000 for the Music City Plan, $1.8 million for culture grants, and $0.5 million for the tourism office. Negotiations are continuing, but it's expected that most of the $4.9 million that's received by Toronto Tourism will fund Mississauga projects, and Council will receive a more detailed update in a future report. Both the federal and provincial governments provide a share of the gas tax that they collect to the city for infrastructure projects. So the city received directly through AMO $22.7 million in 2018, and from the Region Appeal, which was their share, $18.9 million, they retain a small portion for the accessible bus. From the province, we received $18.1 million. The city spends the federal contribution on transit and roads capital projects. We spend the provincial contribution to fund transit operating costs. The rules around the programs differ, and how money can be spent differs. The last provincial government announced that they would double their gas tax payments to municipalities. The current government indicated during the election that they would support this increase, but we've received no official confirmation of this. As a result, these revenues are not included in the budget and forecast projections. We will advise Council when more information is received from the province. In 2016-17, the federal government provided significant funding to municipalities through Canada 150 Phase 1 and 2, and the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund and the Clean Water Wastewater Fund. In total, Mississauga received $75.1 million from these programs, and the provincial government also participated in some of them. In 2017, the federal government announced that it would be ending these programs and establishing a new Investment Infrastructure Program, or ISIP, with funding in a number of different categories, and that's what each of the columns represents. These programs are application-based, unfortunately, and for most of them, the application rules have not been announced, although in many cases it would appear that they will require asset management plans, impact studies around climate change resilience, and social benefit plans, which in my view will make the application process more onerous, add to the complexity of the projects, and likely increase somewhat project cost. And you'll recall at last week's council, we advised that the city will be submitting a funding application for Cooksville Creek Watershed for $82.8 million over a 10-year period, with 40% or $33.1 million in federal funding for those stormwater works. The application is due in January and requires completion of an environmental impact study called a PIEVC or PIVEC, and I have no idea what that stands for, and you can ask Helen when she talks. The transit piece of the ISIP was shown in the 2018 federal budget documents. We have estimated that Mississauga's allocation will be in the range of $847 million, including both the federal and provincial shares. Fees and charges make a significant contribution to budget funding. Council has always had a philosophy of charging fees for programs and services where the benefiting customer can easily be identified. As a result, the city has a range of fees for transit, recreation programs, and for property development. In some cases, though, legislation limits the amounts that can be charged. So back to this slide, with a little bit more detail yet, again. This breaks out the budget increases in more detail. Overall, the budget is increasing by $26.4 million or 4.8%. Most of the increase in normal operations can be attributed back to fire and emergency services and MyWay. In the case of MyWay, a portion of its increase is from annualization of last year's service increases. Similarly, the majority of new initiative costs relate to fire and emergency services and MyWay. The capital infrastructure and debt repayment levy adds a further 2% to the 4.8% increase. Future years are currently forecast to have higher tax increases. As always, we will work to reduce these increases. So just a reminder that the city portion of the tax bill represents only 35% of the total tax bill. Most of the property tax bill goes to fund the region and education. This slide gives some sense of where the city spends its budget dollars. So on $100,000 of assessed value of a property, approximately $61 pays for fire and emergency services, and of that, $415 represents the current increase for fire. Similarly, $47 pays for MyWay, and the increased portion is $4.53. The contribution towards the capital infrastructure levy is around $47, and the increase portion is $5.10. You saw this slide in Jim's presentation. Mississauga taxes continue to be reasonable compared to our benchmark municipalities, and I'd point out this chart also includes region and education taxes. I've always had a little bit of fun with this slide. It just goes through and compares city taxes of $1,850 paid on an average single-family detached house assessed at $645,000 to some other common household costs like insurance, gas, and hydro. And I'm sure that you are pleased that I made it through in 42 minutes and not 50 minutes. So I'm done.
Thank you. Jeff, on slide 66, 60, no, wait a minute. Oh, I'm not sure where the numbers are. It's either 60 or 61. The hotel tax one.
Yep.
Sorry, I think it's 61. No, the next one.
Oh. Yep, that one.
Okay. Where have you shown in the budget, and I'd asked this in the spring.
Oh, it's in the recreation section of the budget.
No, but what have you shown in the budget for the 50%, which is about $5 million, coming off the original proposed budget to what you have today, utilizing the $5 million? Where will I find that line item?
You won't, but it's in there.
Okay, I asked for it to be very clear.
Yeah, well, and we can get that to you separately.
Okay. So have you shown on, for example, it would be in Paul's budget, where we've approved that the cost of the tourism staffing, the festival grants, and other items like that were to be taken out of the city budget and put into this budget. So is that reflected in the budget book? I really couldn't see it.
Yes.
So I probably missed it.
Yeah, but we'll identify
Well,
that
if you just
for
let me know what page it is, and I'll go in and flag it. But as long as it's there. And what did you, how did that, what impact, because I'd asked Janice this in the spring, what the impact would be of those funds coming out of or that expense coming out of the budget. How does that relate to the impact on the reduction in our budget from what you showed us in the spring until now? How much of it was based on that money, that cost, sorry, coming out of the budget?
So your question is how much did we transfer off the property tax and really substitute some of the money from the...
Right, moved it off the property tax
Yeah.
to the destination marketing fee, accommodation tax.
Well, you know, Sherry's here, she probably knows it off the top of her head, because I don't. There is a section in the recreation budget that does show that information. So if you keep going, we'll dig that out and we'll make sure we get that to you before the end of this conversation.
I wanted to be able to say that we started, I know, Jeff, on one of the other slides, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to find the one, where you showed what you brought us in the spring. I think it was slide 33, maybe. I think I wrote that one down. Where what you brought, yes, slide 33. The June Budget Committee, you showed a 6.1% budget increase. You're now showing a 4.8. So how much of that difference was related to the new revenue and the removal of those costs from the tax base?
Okay, so when you look at the spending for future, it was, like, I think I said, the Music City plan of 0.1 would have been totally new, so that would not have been in the budget. The culture grants, I think, are a little bit higher, but assuming they were the 1.8 million, that would have been taken out of the tax funding and moved into this fund.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we have, it's 2.4 million, so Sherry did have the right number. We found the
Okay.
page, and we'll get you the page number. It's 2.4 million. That's been moved over off the
Should
property
have been more
tax.
than that. The grants alone were 2 or 3 million.
But not all of the grants, as I understand it, would fit the tourism definition. So I think they've parsed through. Maybe Sherry can
Okay,
come
and the
forward.
staff,
She seems
the
to have
cost
more
for
of the
staffing that was
detail.
moved out,
So what?
that came to just 2.4 million?
So it's I-13 in the budget book, and it's 1.8 million for festival and event grants and $500,000 for the tourism office. So that was, and that's in line with the corporate report that council approved.
Okay,
at
all
the
right,
time.
yeah, I couldn't find my copy of the report, so, okay, so that was all. I thought we were moving more out than that, but
And that's about 0.5%.
that was about 0.5%.
Roughly. That's about 0.5%.
Okay, so that new revenue, we can say, is responsible for about 0.5% reduction of the budget. I mean, I'm looking, it's a good news story that we were able to reduce because we found some new revenue that is very rare for us to be able to find.
Correct. Had that not happened, the 4.8% would have been 5.3%.
Okay, thank you. That's what I really wanted to know. Thank you.
All right, thank you. To Councillor Parrish, please.
Yeah, I like the city manager's interjection. I don't think we should be totally replacing festival grants out of the taxpayers' dollars by tourism dollars. Not that I would ever disagree with my illustrious leader of tourism, but I think what we're trying to do is improve those festivals without putting more burden on the citizens who do all the fundraising and do all the work for it. So I wouldn't want to see one cancel the other out. I would like to see some of that money still come out of the taxpayers' dollars, and I would like to see the rest of that money that's coming in from tourism to be justified by the fact it's bringing in people from out of town. So you answered my question, but I never miss an opportunity to push a button and get some attention. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. Jeff, just a couple of things myself, if I may. So I'm very pleased overall. I think we continue to be fiscally responsible as a city. And yes, while we are increasing our budget, we're holding the line, and we're continuing to find savings and efficiencies, 3.1 million this year, and we continue to have our taxes lower than the GTA average. So all makes me very pleased. You didn't mention Wi-Fi on buses. When you compared all the differences between them before and now, then and now? Yes, no?
Yeah.
Yep, good, Wi-Fi. We talked about the new fire stations, 7 of them, and how we're going to finance them. Do I understand you are recommending a 1% levy for 4 years?
Yes. Well, but it's built into like the 4.8% for this year.
It is built in.
Yes,
it
it's
won't
not on
be a
top of that.
separate line item that's allocated?
No.
Okay.
We're not treating it as a separate
heartburn
levy.
when you said that.
Yeah, no.
So if you're satisfied, or if at this point, I recognize we still have a lot of details to dig into, but if you're satisfied with the overall number, that overall number includes the financing plan that we proposed to you for how we're going to deal with that issue already. It's not, it wouldn't be on top of.
I was satisfied with our number.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned about the region number and why that was escalating, but I guess we'll deal with that when we get there. I noticed the My Way service hours. As a matter of fact, last year we had 48,000 hours in new service. And this year, or coming year, only 31,000 hours. What's the difference, Jeff? Jeff?
Actually, if you
Jack?
want,
Jeff?
no, I can jump in on that.
Jeff or Jeff?
So we can't do everything.
Okay.
And so because of the pressure on the emergency services, we had a strategic conversation about, first of all, the capacity of My Way to grow. So Jeff can certainly speak to that, because we have had challenges in getting our full hiring and recruitment done. So, you know, there are some considerations there, but ultimately it was our judgment that to do the full 2% for transit and then layer on an additional 1% for the fire and emergency services would take us beyond, I think, a number that you would be comfortable. So, you know, these are always trade-offs and gives and takes, and really about setting priorities.
I was just going to say.
And we feel we've reached the point where we have been investing in transit for many years, and we continue to need to do that. But we thought that we would moderate the pace of investment in transit to allow some room to be able to now start to address with the pressure for fire. But maybe I can ask Jeff just to speak specifically to how we feel that that's still a prudent and good level of investment.
To you, Madam Mayor, the question on transit growth. So yeah, as Janice alluded, we have been, Council has been investing heavily in transit growth over the past couple of years, and has seen increases as high as 3% service growth, hence the 46,000 service hours. To Janice's point, we do see a bit of a need to slow down some of that growth, while still investing in transit. We've continued to move forward with the My Way 5 service plan, which identifies sort of a planning framework for My Way. And as Janice mentioned, I think this is a very strategic move to continue to grow transit, but to continue to invest in our other service areas. And, you know, we will see a lot of construction on our roads next year, particularly with the Burnhamthorpe Water Project, with potential start of the Huron-Ontario LRT. So we do see a lot of congestion management as a focus as well. So keeping service running is another priority for My Way, in addition to service growth.
Okay. You know, we were talking about gas tax funding, federal, provincial, added up to about $60 million, is that right?
41.
41.6 federal.
No, you're right, 60.
18
Yeah, 60.
Provincial. Yeah. My concern is that's going to be declining, right, as we move to hybrid electric vehicles. Price of gas seems to be a little lower these days, too.
Yeah, so, I mean, as far as we're aware, we're not looking at dramatic declines. The provincial government has still engaged in a conversation about potentially increasing the provincial gas tax. So we're not at this point seeing that as a significant risk. I mean, I think any declines in there from our projections.
My recollection is it's a fixed dollar, like
yeah, it
4
doesn't
cents
depend
per
on the
liter
price
or whatever
of gas.
it is, you know.
Yeah.
It's not a fixed dollar, it's fixed.
No, fixed, yeah, amount.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was percentage, but.
It's a cent, 2 cents per liter. It's not a percentage of gas prices.
I think just to help, I believe the federal government just comes out of general revenues. It's called gas tax, but there's actually a program line item. It doesn't actually fluctuate. That's my understanding.
Yeah, my concern
Unlike the province, I think it is tied to the price and the various fluctuations.
Okay, my concern was the fluctuation. So you're estimating for us 1.69 plus 1.07, 2.75, unless there are changes at the region. Yeah. And if so, you think it could be as high as 3.15?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone? Someone like to move the deputant, please? Councillor Starr, all those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Jeff. That was very thorough. That was well done.